Good evening, everyone. We are delighted to welcome you to Day 6 of the International Faculty Development Program, organized by Don Bosco College in collaboration with St. John's University, New York, and the Institute for International Communication, New York. Academia is a continuously evolving, and it makes it essential for academicians to evolve and positively adapt to the changes. Design thinking as an approach has touched every walk of life. And as academicians, it is important for us to know and adopt it effectively for our classrooms. This evening, we are privileged to have with us Dr. Luca Iandoli as our esteemed resource person, a renowned expert in innovation and design thinking. Dr. Iandoli will guide us through the topic Design Thinking for Educators, Innovating Technology for the Classroom. Before we delve into this topic, let us have a look at his profile.
Just a minute, ma'am.
Dr. Luca Iandoli is the Dean of Collins College of Professional Studies and a professor in the Division of Computer Science, Mathematics, and Science. With a distinguished career, he has served as an associate professor at the University of Naples at Italy, a visiting research professor at Stevens Institute of Technology, and a Fulbright visiting scholar at MIT Center for Collective Intelligence. Dr. Iandoli has authored over 100 research papers on interfirm collaboration, collective intelligence in online networks, and leveraging online collaboration for creativity, innovation, and problem solving. His recent book, Elegant Design, was recognized as one of the top 5 essential books for 2024 by the International Council for Small Business. A former president of ICSP, Dr. Iandoli focuses his research on using online interaction to harness collective knowledge and foster large-scale innovation. Don Bosco College welcomes you.
Doctor, we consider it our honor to have you with us today, and over to you. We are all ears, looking forward to listen to you.
Thank you very much. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you so much for attending the event, for the kind introduction, and my special thank you to Dr. Gio and Dr. Monteiro for inviting me to be part of this excellent series of talk. So today I'm going to discuss with you some application of design thinking in conjunction with the use of technology in the classroom. I want to start with a statement that is probably not so original, but we need to really embrace this in a world in which content is so much available most of the time for free. Even good quality content is everywhere. For us, just focusing on content is no longer sufficient. As instructors, how we need to understand that how we teach is now more important than what we teach. So keep this in mind, and I hope that at the end of my presentation, this will be clear, and especially what we can do about it. So on these slides, I put a number of trends I'm sure you're familiar with, how education has been changing in the last, I would say, couple of decades. I'm going to go fast on this because these things are well known, so people don't necessarily seek a degree. We know that even the space design of our institution is changing. There's an interest toward creative spaces in addition to the traditional lecture hall. That's a combination of digital and physical, and so our students constantly live in a sort of a hybrid reality. From teaching to coaching is another important trend. Interdisciplinary collaboration and problem-based learning are becoming more central. And so on and so forth. And you can recognize a lot of this probably in your experience or just based on recent research. So why this is happening? We know that the big enabler or disruptor, depending on how you see it, is digital innovation. So I have here a picture that I just looked for on the internet, like what a classroom looked like in the Middle Age, and this is what it looked like. And then what is going to be the classroom today? Well, and then in the meanwhile, our classrooms have not changed much. I'm talking about the physical classroom. It's pretty much the same. So someone speaking, people sitting behind their desk and listening. But of course, we know this. All of this is changing deeply because of digitalization. So my answer is, it's not about more technology. I think we have enough technology. The problem is not technology per se, but how we use it and how we frame the use of technology in the way we teach, in the pedagogy. And this is where we need more work, I think. And this is my proposal. I think the answer is a combination of three things. And I'll explain what I mean, especially with the first two: aesthetic reasoning, making, and using technology to support creativity. So let me start with aesthetic reasoning. If you want to know more about my work on this, the book was mentioned, one of the books was mentioned in the introduction. It's Elegant Design. This is apparently a design book, but this is very general, and it's about this idea that our reasoning is primarily aesthetic. And in practice, what do we do with this aesthetic reasoning? How do we solve problem using aesthetic reasoning? And the book is full of examples, mostly on product design, but not necessarily only for that. The second one is more application oriented, if you want, and it's called Design Your Business. In this book, I try to apply these ideas to teaching entrepreneurship, which is one of my interests. And this is more of a manual, how you want to implement, how you can implement design-driven pedagogy in entrepreneurship and innovation classes. And they're both available online. You can check them out. I'll be happy to know what you think about it if you happen to read them or to stumble into them. So let's start with aesthetic reasoning. That's the first component of my three. So aesthetic reasoning is really a part about from how artists think. One point I make in my book is that there's a lot that we can learn from how artists learn and about their ideas, the creative process they implement. And in one of the chapters, we interview a famous Italian chef who was a 3-star Michelin, started this restaurant, which is close to Naples, which is also where I come from. It's an amazing place on the Amalfi Coast. And here he's just a little piece from a very long interview we did with him to try to understand how he put together his creative ideas and create his magnificent plates. And then at some point he started to talk about how he enters some sort of almost a meditation process in which he fully immerses himself in the experience of the ingredient. And one sentence that stuck with me was when he said, creativity cannot be dissociated from matter. For him, the ingredients, the matter of his cooking are so important. And he spent a lot of time just contemplating and analyzing the property and smelling and touching and observing things like, very simple things like a tomato, which is very good, the ones that they make over there. And then the next step for him is to make sense of all this complexity and try to deliver this complexity in his creation to the customer so that also the customer can recognize it. And also this element, at least in this particular case, of being very much loyal to his culinary tradition and his cultural biography, if you want. So this idea that we have a past, we have knowledge, and then there's a reality, and then the combination of these two things into novel ideas is what he does. So in the book you can find more about this interview and the process. But this is another example from a French writer, Gustave Flaubert. I like this passage when he says that basically one problem we have, this is the big barrier to creativity, is that we tend to classify experience into well-known codified bucket, if you want, and we don't revisit those experiences. So we just apply automatically this experience to the perception of reality, which is a big barrier to creativity. In fact, what Flaubert argues for is that we should renew the way we look at things, even the things that we know very well, or we think we know very well. Like, for instance, he says, to describe a burning fire or a tree, we must remain before that fire or that tree, as long as I do not resemble any other fire or tree. So this ability to observe and to understand the uniqueness of what we observe is a key element of creativity. And another element of creativity, I have a little video here. You can find it on YouTube if you want. It's a video of the French painter Monet, who's painting in his garden at Givenchy. He made a lot of paintings, painting flowers, and especially these floating flowers that are were in his pond. They're relatively famous, and they're quite famous actually, and there's many different iterations of this subject in many of his paintings. So what the point I want to make with this is that you see how he's painting. So in this case, he's expressing his idea through a medium, and the medium is painting. So the medium is important. The ability of making things is important, because that's how we express our ideas. This is how we embody our ideas from what they are in our mind into something that another human being can use, can enjoy, can relate to. Without this ability of using a medium in a proper way, without this materiality of making, it's much harder to convince someone else that what we are doing is important or relevant for them. So moving to the next slide, in the book, we try to summarize this process into 3 major steps. One is this element of we call sensing. It's really a mix of participating observation, full immersion in the experience, and combination of this experience with the body of knowledge that must be deep. So that you need competence, you need background, you need excellence in your craft, in your skill. But this cannot be, this is not sufficient. You also need the experience. You also need the observation and the participation. The second one is the element of transformation. So at some point, all of this thinking, all of this observation must converge towards some kind of artifact. That's the making part. And here, the medium is important. A medium could be anything. Think of technology as a medium, technology that you're using to do what you're doing. And number 3, of course, this is the creative part. When you master the medium, when you have all of this background and emotional understanding of the word, you are in a better position to reinvent and reframe what you do in novel ways. So making, why making? Why is so important? This book that you see here by Tim Engel is something I definitely recommend. It's a great read. And in this book, was an anthropology professor, and Engel describes his experiment with introducing making in his PhD anthropology class. So we're not talking a class about manufacturing or anything engineering related. It was a social science class in which basically he wanted his student to understand differently. And in this table, I've tried to summarize the big differences between the pedagogy of making and the traditional pedagogy. The most important one is probably the first one, learning with things as opposed to learning from things. And then this approach that the things that we create are growing more or less organically. There's an emergent process versus the more rational, if you want, Western-like, traditionally, very traditional in the Western pedagogy of producing. So you have an idea and then you have a process and you produce an outcome, right? That is the result of your planning activity. The importance of experience versus the importance of information transfer, transformation versus description and abstraction, observation, participating observation versus neutral observation, which is a tenet of the scientific method in which the observer has to be neutral, right? Instead, in the pedagogy of making, the observer has to be interacting with the word. And then the experience of the flow, the creative flow versus ideation, this abstract process that only takes place in our mind. So how do we implement this? So far I have been a little bit theoretical, but then there are methodologies. So, and probably you're already familiar with this because now the scientific is very popular and a lot of people are using it. You might definitely know about this book, Change by Design by Tim Brown. This was basically a product of the Stanford D School, IDEO. And then I really like this guide, the IDEO Guide to Human-Centered Design, that actually is available for free if you want to download it. And it's a very simple cycle of the start with empathizing with the user, understanding what the real problem is, come up with ideas. But then the most important part is prototyping, which is you have to embody these ideas into some kind of artifact and then go back to the user to test it. And then you do this cycle many, many times as soon as possible. Prototyping is actually early prototyping. You have to build things, even if those things are very imperfect realization what you want to make at the end. And the idea is to use prototype as a discovery process, not so much as a testing process. Now, I think even if you know this, sometimes, the way I see people use it is a little bit shallow because they don't frame it into this deeper understanding of what it means to implement this cycle within some more solid theoretical background, which for me is the pedagogy of making and is the aesthetic reasoning, these two pillars. If you're not familiar with the approach, one important element or model, if you want, is the double diamond. There is this idea that in design thinking you have to alternate. So the process is, as a lot of iterations, you have to alternate convergent thinking and divergent thinking. That's what the diamond does. When it opens up, is that you are diverging. When it closes down, you are converging. And it's called the double diamond because there is these two different moments. One is more centered on understanding the problem. So it's problem discovery, really, because we presume we know the problem. We presume we know the user, but most of the time we don't. And so that's why on the top of the picture, you see designing the right thing. You want to understand the problem because you want to design the right thing. And then only later, there is the solution process, which is about designing things right. But even in this step, you need a lot of exploration and then convergence. I've seen this implemented in many schools as a 2 semesters capstone, where you have the first semester, which is mostly focused on understanding the problem, and the second semester in the innovation project that the students are doing is more focused on the actual implementation of the idea. Another important element, I mentioned it before, is the early and also low fidelity prototyping. So if you want to do design thinking, you have to prototype a lot. And I know this is a problem for students who are not technologically savvy. Sometimes, you think this is just for engineers or architects or people more in the STEM field, but it's not necessarily so. I've tried this with students of all backgrounds, and they don't have to necessarily master the technology. They need to build things, and they can do this in very simple ways at the beginning, using paper, pencil, cardboard, you name it. As long as they try to give some form to the idea and to test that out. Because when you embody the ideas into some kind of artifact, what you can get from the test, from the feedback that you got from the users, is much more powerful than just expressing your idea and asking for feedback. And also, I think it's an incentive for students to understand that even if they're not technology students, they need to develop a certain level of mastery in the ability to build things. And this is very, very formative and also maybe useful from the practical point of view. The other element of prototyping that is important is pivoting. So you start with something, you think that people, for instance, need a special backpack, and then you understand as you do this discovery process that it's not a backpack what they're looking for. They're looking more for a food container. And maybe in the end, you end up developing an app because that's what they really wanted, more of a system to manage their food. So it could be this, or it could be something else. But the interesting part is that you understand how you switch to another rendition of your prototype because you have a better understanding of the problem. If you don't build things, it's unlikely you're going to do this. You're going to keep going with your initial idea until you find out too late that that's not what people wanted. Because that thing is not solving their problem, which is not your understanding of the problem. So that's a very important advantage of prototyping. We use this at St. John's. We have created a space called the Design Factory. We're also part of a global network of design factories around the world with which we share, you know, with which we collaborate. We share best practices. We learn from each other. As you can see, it's a space that is very multidisciplinary. There's a little bit of maker space. There's a lot of digital technology in this room. We use it for different programs because in our college, we have many different programs from different disciplines, from advertising to technology, to forensic science. So all of these are very different, but nevertheless, they can share this pedagogic base and they use this space. And also students use this space for their own activities. They have their own gatherings. It could be a club, it could be something specific that a group of students is doing. They can book the space, they can work in the space, they can just socialize in the space, talking about innovation from their point of view. So, which leads me to my third element, technology. So now that we have an understanding of why, so first of all, our rationality is primarily aesthetic. Aesthetic means we reason with our ends, we reason with our senses, we understand the world and perceive the world with aesthetic categories, we validate things emotionally, and all of this does not exclude the rationality in the traditional sense. So evaluation, planning, facts. It just put those things in perspective and gives the primacy to this aesthetic perception of the world, which is the way we interact with the world. The making is the materiality of it and the ability to use materials and constraints and media to express ideas within those constraints. And because we have those constraints, we can be more creative. That's a paradox, if you want. But creativity exists because there are constraints, because there are needs. It doesn't exist in the vacuum, right? So if we accept this, we can think of using technology in the classroom in a different way. So I'm going to give you some examples. I'm going to see how I'm doing with time. So when I mention technologies for creativity, I predominantly refer to digital technology. And the reason is that digital technology is very flexible and it can be used for creative purposes, maybe in more different ways and many different ways compared to non-digital technology. And also it's constantly evolving. And number three is kind of very affordable. Sometimes it's completely free. Sometimes you can get it for less money. It could be the institution or the student who pay for it, but it's way more affordable than hardware and things that require heavy infrastructure. So this is just a list here. Computer aided design, and the most recent element manifestation of it is 3D printing, virtual reality, physical computing, open hardware, open source software, website development, app development, digital publishing, video making, video streaming. If you think about it, a lot of our students already play with it. Maybe they do it for their social media. Maybe they do it for their own enjoyment, not necessarily for something associated with their learning, but they're kind of savvy with these tools. And so why don't we leverage that interest and motivation they already have and bring these tools in the context of their learning process? Specifically, I want to focus on generative AI, and the reason for this, there are two reasons for this. One is personal. I'm working a lot on this, and also helping with other colleagues, our university, to make sense of generative AI and how to bring generative AI to the classroom, pedagogically, from the point of view of policing or regulating it. But then, of course, it's very current, and I think people want to know about it. I think each of us is kind of struggling with this technology, recognizing how good it is from certain point of views, but also how problematic it is from other points of view. So I want to give you an idea of how to use generative AI in the context of technology for creativity, to support students' creativity. Personally, I've used it in my class. I only teach this one class. There was a class with a lot of creative content generation. It was a mass comm class. It's called a communication design. It worked really well. It worked really well. Students loved it, and I think it helped them to create better outputs. Following an approach that I'm going to show you in a minute. So, what is a good use of generative AI? There are many bad uses, but a good use is helping students to favor this transformation, this passage between an idea and what I call a product. Think of an output. It doesn't have to be a product in the commercial sense. Think of an artifact, something they have to build, they have to deliver at the end of the course, maybe through a project. Basically, generative AI can help narrow this gap. There's always a gap between what we have in mind and what we are able to build, right? So first of all, generative AI can be used as a possibility engine. It just creates for you multiple versions of something. And that variety is important for you to come up with new ideas. So it just accelerates the ideation pace because it gives you more variety. And then I think this is very important too. Since generative AI is primarily a technology that works with human language, it's very good at articulating something in many different ways. You can ask generative AI to say the same thing in 10 different ways. And this articulation of the same thing in 10 different ways can open up the mind to some insight. And of course, students can do this on their own, but it's going to take more time. And not necessarily they will have the ability to generate 10 different ways. Maybe they generate 3 different ways. So it just, the sheer amount of novelty, more than novelty, I would say variety that you can generate with this technology. However, with a caveat, and I use this this analogy also with my students to make sure that they understand, there are different ways of using this technology. And I think this is a good way, and there are other ways that I don't think they are good. But basically, I tell them, generative AI is kind of a sous chef that can improve your ability to cook better. But you are the chef. You're not delegating to your sous chef your creation. You can get some help, you can get some ideas, you can get some feedback, but it's up to you to drive the innovation process. And in terms of practical uses of it, what they can do with it, they can use the sous chef to understand the users better and faster. Like I say, they can create more ideas. They can refine the concept. How do we improve this? You can ask to your sous chef, what would you do with this? Like, give me an idea. And sometimes, pair of fresh eyes give you a great idea that you didn't think about. And also can help build prototypes, at least at the initial steps where you have no idea or no many ideas about how to build this something. And then you start to have some suggestions. I'll give you some examples to show you how this can be done. And then it can support also the validation of market and product hypothesis. So if you're building this thing that you're building for someone, how do you make sure that this target user is actually going to be happy with your creation? That's what I mean with market. So I'm using a little bit of an entrepreneurship jargon, but it doesn't just apply to commercial development of ideas or for profit activities. You can think of this in any possible use, even in the context of not-for-profit. You always have a user that has a problem. You're always trying to do something for someone to help this person. And then you need to understand what they need. You need to build something that they can use, can afford, right? So I like this. This, my colleague came out with this. He said AI stands for Amplifier of Intelligence. Giuseppe Zollo is my co-author of one of the books that I presented before. And he said, basically works like an amplifier of intelligence. The intelligence is the intelligence that you have as a human being. Whatever you have, you can build on it and use generative AI to grow it. But if you don't have much as an input, you're not going to get much as an output. So generative AI is now going to supplement or compensate for the lack of intelligence. The intelligence has to be in the question, right? In the way we drive the bot to answer our questions. And I like this. I found this in a newsletter that I follow. When the author said, Craig was like, he said, well, when generative AI produces disappointing results, the problem might be you, not AI. And so this is something also that I tell my students. you're gonna get what you put in. So if you garbage in, garbage out, that's something that computer science say all the time. So if you don't have good quality thinking at the beginning of the process, you're not gonna get anything that is much better than what you have. Also, I try to let them understand there's a difference between how human process and information and understand and how machine do that. And this table kind of summarize the differences. So it also, you know, reiterates the importance of aesthetic reasoning, because that part, the first column, is something that machines cannot do. They do not have senses. They do not have a nervous system. They do not have a physical understanding of the world. They are not able to reason with small data. They need a lot of data to work. Our brain doesn't. Nevertheless, we might be right a lot of times, right? Even if we don't have all of this data. We learn from others through a social process. Learning as a social component is not just a transaction. And then we have emotions. Whereas machine, they use sensors, data, statistical models, big data. They recognize patterns. They don't understand those patterns. They just recognize the patterns. And they evaluate the goodness of a solution based on the fitness of the solution calculated with some mathematical model. So very, very different, but also very complementary. So it's important to collaborate with machines as long as we understand what we do better and what they do better. So that's why I use design thinking in conjunction with generative AI. And I think it's a good way to do that, to use generative AI in a positive way. Just use the framework that we've seen before and use generative AI in each of the steps. And I'll show you some example. So this is one that, again, I teach classes in entrepreneurship, product innovation. So sometimes students have to build something, right? They have to, it could be also a challenge that comes from a company, like in this case, a company making kitchen stoves, and they had this problem. Like, we want to make a safer cooking device, but at the same time, we want to make it exciting. We want to make it appealing, because safety is important. Customers will appreciate it. But normally, typically at least, safety is not sexy from the marketing point of view. It's not the driver that will attract a customer. So there are other factors. So how do we do this? So that's the dilemma the company was struggling with. And then I'm going to give you some examples of how you can prompt a bot so that you can get some ideas about how to do this. For instance, you can ask ChatGPT or any other model software use to suggest questions that we might ask to know our prospective current customers better in relation to their needs, issues, the problems that they face when using the product, the marketing personas, and things like that. You can ask, these are examples of useful questions in that area. So, can you help me identify the main safety concern that users have about kitchen stovetops based on recent users' reviews and feedback? Can you create a few user personas representing different types of customers who might be interested in a safer kitchen stovetop? And so it's going to give you a lot of profiles. Can you generate an empathy map for a typical user of a kitchen stovetop, including what they say, what they think, what they do, and what they feel? That's what an empathy map is. It looks like this. So what customers say about a product, what they do with that product, how they feel about that product. And this is what I generated with very, very little time. And all of this makes a lot of sense. Of course, it needs to be validated. Not all of this can be necessarily true or important. And that's where also our student ability kicks in. So in the editing and understanding and assessing the validity of what the machine is producing. But all of these are very appropriate and very good food for thought. in the particular application. I'm not going to read the whole thing, just to give you an idea of, how much variety you can generate literally in a few minutes in terms of possible feeling, in terms of possible uses, in terms of possible thinking that the customer is doing about this particular device. In the ideate phase, for instance, you can use the brainstorm, the bot as a brainstorming companion to inspire and favor insights. Again, the insight is up to you, but you're gonna receive a lot of materials and a lot of output from the bot that can help you to find one. And these are some possible prompts for the ideation phase. Suggest 10 innovative ideas for making a kitchen stovetop safer without compromising on style. Number 2 is, how can we combine high-tech safety features with modern design elements to create an appealing kitchen stovetop? Or inspiration, can you provide examples of other household products that have successfully combined safety and aesthetics? What can we learn from them? If you try this once, I have no time to give you a demo, but if you in an extended version of this workshop, I did that. It's amazing how much you get out of that. And again, not necessarily all you get is true or valuable for you, but there's a lot of good material. And in the prototyping phase, you can do something else. You can ask the bot to help you figure out what the prototype looks like. What are the components? What are the features? What's the technology? Maybe also generate some visual rendition of the prototype, because now these tools also allow users to draw or create images, right? So you can visualize your prototype before you start building it. So you can ask things like, give me a few low-fidelity prototype concepts for this stovetop. Or what are the features? Or can you give me a visual of the interface of this thing? And then this is what I got, for instance, with one initial prompt. I was using the free version back then, and the free version is very poor when it comes to generating images. Now things have changed, and the new versions are much better. And then, of course, if you have the premium version, even better. So I tried with the premium version. I think it was ChatGPT 3.5, and I was a little bit more specific with the prompt, because one thing that a generative AI can do is it understands styles. It can reproduce existing stuff and kind of repurpose this style. For instance, in this case, I was referring to this company. It's called Meg. They have this retro design, vintage approach to designing appliances, mostly borrowed from the 60s, all these round shapes, and except, the appliances are very modern and technologically rich. And you see the difference between the free and the paid version, much more detailed. I didn't like it, honestly. So I say, well, I don't like it. Maybe this 50s aesthetic does not match the elegant induction stovetop prototype I have in mind. Can you generate alternatives? And he gave me a bunch of different alternatives: Scandinavian minimalism, industrial chic, modern luxury, eco-friendly, contemporary, with a lot of description about the features, the advantages of each. And then also, I asked for, okay, can you give me some pictures? And then this is the industrial chic, which I didn't like. The modern luxury started to look more like what I had in mind, and so on and so forth. Of course, you can spend a lot of time. You can generate multiple alternatives. You can do a lot of things, just combining your ideas with what the machine produced for you. So that's the point. So we can use technology to support creativity, but we have to re-engineer the way we design learning if you want to do that. We need those material elements, the experience, the full immersion, the physical world, and then, of course, we need the technology. This is an example of a workflow I've used in my class, in which there are pretty much the same steps, except as you can see here, I've added an element of alternating the offline and the online moment. I don't want my students to spend endless hours just connected to a screen. They need to stop, they need to shut it down, they need to reconvene with their team, they need to discuss and use the materials that they got from the interrogation of the bot to stimulate group creativity, team creativity, and then go back online and then use different type of tools and alternating individual and team and online and offline moments to generate what they are supposed to generate. And this is very, very productive and combines, the aesthetic and physical element of the learning process with the digital element that is supported by the technology. So this is my conclusion. For me, it's a kind of a paradox, if you want, but not so much. The pedagogy in the age of AI should help students to rediscover and valorize the material and social sides of the human experience, and then combine the human aesthetic intelligence with the creative use of digital tools. But once they understand they have a body, they have emotion, they have social connection, and those are priorities. And also, I think he helps, this approach helps students in a different way. There's always a question like, if machines become better and better, what is left for us to do, right? Well, these things are left for us to do. Machines cannot do this. They are not creative per se. They can help with problem solving, but they don't understand when the solution is good. The validation part, because a lot of that is emotional. Critical thinking, of course, is important. Empathy, understanding other human beings and their issues and their problems. The making, the materiality of it, they cannot do it yet. Our ends are still the best technology we have, and ethics, of course. Distinguishing good from bad, right from wrong. This is something that machines are not designed to do, and they cannot do because they lack that type of emotional validation and empathetic validation that is important for making ethical judgments. And that's it. I'm going to stop here. And thank you so much for listening to me. And I look forward to your comments or questions.
Thank you, Doctor, for the wonderful session. Starting with how you teach is more important than what you teach. I think that is something that we all agree with. And taking us through such a in-depth topic. It's a very deep topic. And then you took it very detailed for us, starting with aesthetic reasoning, making, and technology for creativity. And we really appreciate the way you took us through the use of technology, especially generative AI, and the importance of being in the driving seat or being the chef, where we don't make AI everything. But somewhere this is a challenge I think we all face, especially the students, because when we have an assignment or anything given, they get the information, and I don't as you rightly put it, AI makes research or thinking process very fast. It can give us 10 different options. As you rightly said, it is an amplifier. But sometimes we have this challenge of students being stuck at that point where they don't go beyond what they get from generative AI. What do you think would be a way of making sure that students don't get stuck with that and don't over depend on technology or AI, generative AI?
Yeah, I'm aware of the risk, and I know that the convenience of using this technology is so massive that it can offset a lot of other reasons for using it or not using it, and because it's so fast, it's so affordable. It produces decent outcome with very little effort. So why would you bother creating something new or more developed if that costs you time, effort, when you can get something decent with little effort? So so that's a big question, but I think that's where our role as an instructors is important. I think if you want, let's say generative AI doesn't exist, you still can have students who get stuck at some point. You still can get students who don't want to or are not able to go to the next level. What do you do as an instructor? Well, you help them. It's your job. It's your job to bring them from A to B. because they have AI, it doesn't mean they cannot do it. You can just make it very clear and also build assignment and homework in a way that that process is facilitated, for instance, through iteration. Like I ask my students to do the same thing 3 times, because the first time, invariably, I tell them, yeah, this is good, but you can do better. So go back, work more, and of course, I give them more specific feedback about what is that they are doing, and then yes, use AI. I also tell them, well, use AI in this way. Don't use it in this way. And then, the next time they come back with something better. And then they come back with something better. Of course, there are always students who are not going to do that. That's bad students, good students. That's part of life. That was the story all the time, right? Before AI, before any technology, and will be like that. But not because there is AI, necessarily they're going to stop.
Thank you, Doctor. So we as teachers continue to motivate our students to move to the next level.
Yes, and I think this is even more important today. I mean, it's part of the teacher job. Has always been part of our job description, if you want. But now, let's say before it was maybe 50% that coaching element and 50% was more about the content creation and delivery. Now, content creation, do you really need to create that much content when it's available? No, right? Can you, or even if you do, you can use these technologies to improve your productivity in that area. And then you liberate your time. So your coaching now is not 50, it should be 70% of your time, right? Spending time with students, providing them with feedback should be 70% of your time, because you're liberating 20% of your time using these tools to generate content in different ways.
Thank you, Doctor. The next question we have is the godfather of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, himself had said that AI will become smarter than humans. As part of aesthetic reasoning, you said that machine will not have feelings and emotions. Would in the future they may have that as well? Why not? It may overtake human intelligence. Your idea on that?
I agree with that. That's a substantial risk, and it's embedded in the way these technologies have been created. We should not forget that people who create this technology have that in mind. I'm very frank about this. Like, as a computer scientist, I've been studying artificial intelligence for a long time, well before this new revolution with generative AI. And the dream has always been that, to create a machine that can think, a machine that can be even better than human being. So they're trying. They are trying. However, there are some limitations that are intrinsic in the technology. Emotions are the product of a very complex process that is a combination of, of course, you can have a spiritual view of this. I'm not going to, each of us is different in that respect, but just looking at the biology of emotion, you cannot have emotion if you don't have a body, okay? So machines just do not produce that. However, they can produce a resemblance of it, an illusion of it. And that illusion can be good, very good. And we already see that. You can use ChatGPT. I see my students sometimes use ChatGPT as a sort of almost, I don't want to say a friend, but they can discuss their problem with ChatGPT. And the empathy you get from the machine is pretty surprising. Of course, the machine doesn't understand your problems. It's not real empathy, but it looks like it is. So that's a risk there. Now, when it comes to that part, what is going to happen in the future, nobody really knows. But I think a lot will depend on how we're going to regulate, and also the type of economic incentive that will be made available to developers. In economy, you always have these 2 factors of production: labor and capital. If you all the incentives are about developing capital, companies will do that. At least in a free market, they will do that. And they will forget about the labor component. But this is a choice. This is a choice in which governments and politicians might have a say, and even each of us pushing towards our elected representative when we have, those elected representatives to do otherwise. So those are choices. So far, it doesn't look good. I agree with you.
Thank you, Doctor, for that realistic picture. The next question we have, would the use of generative AI lead only to incremental innovation, given that it depends on the data that it is trained on? Would generative AI in any way lead to radical innovation?
I agree with it, with this comment that the way it works, we know it's basically imitation. It's really a big imitation game. As long as you have a lot of data, the machines can identify patterns in those data, but it's not going to invent really anything. It's just recognizing patterns that are there. However, a lot of creative work is combinatorial. A lot of creativity is about tinkering with things that we already know. So if I connect two things that are disconnected and I think that these two things can be used together, I have something new. I haven't really invented the two parts, but I've invented something new. The Sony Walkman is a good example. If you remember the cassette player, the portable cassette player, what they did, they put together headphones and a player. Nobody had thought about it, but then there was a new market which generated portable music, and it was the ancestor of, this, listening to music on the go. Just combining two things that were already there and existing in some departments at Sony, right? So in that sense, generative AI alone cannot be inventive, but can help humans to see this connection. So by generating the variety that I mentioned before, of course, it's always up to the human to be the real inventor, the chef.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you for taking your time and answering our questions. We have one last question. Ethical regulation of AI usage is a big topic in the world. How does educational governance of AI and the teaching of AI usage to the next generation going to affect educational's role in this?
I'm not sure I understand the question 100%. If the question is about how our practice as educators using generative AI will eventually have an impact on how this will be regulated. I hope so. I think it's our duty as educators to do that, to not just use the technology, but also participate actively in its development, even if it's just intellectually, saying what we think is good with this technology, what we think is bad, and using the technology accordingly in our classroom. Hopefully this will be reflected in some kind of regulation. But we are in a great position, maybe just for our, for the pedagogical side and the research side, but a lot of the problems are the same, even, outside of the academic world. So I think we could really be the driving force for sustainable development of AI. But that takes a movement, right? They takes people who are able to discuss, to debate intellectually, and then make pressure on our stakeholders. Could be companies, could be governments to make the better choices for this development.
Thank you, Doctor. So with that, we come to the end of the sessions, and thank you for your time. Thank you for being available to answer all the questions. I would like to invite Dr. Maria to present the vote of thanks.
Thank you very much.
We extend our heartfelt thanks to Dr. Luca Iandoli for today's enriching session on design thinking for educators, innovating technology for the classroom. Dr. Iandoli's insightful presentation has undoubtedly broadened our perspectives on how design thinking can transform the way we approach teaching and learning, especially through his innovative use of technology. Your expertise and passion have left us inspired and to implement these strategies in our classrooms to enhance the educational experience. Thank you, Professor. We also thank all the participants for your enthusiastic involvement, which has added to the success of the session. Kindly ensure that the feedback forms are completed and submitted by 11 p.m. on the same day. Looking forward to another impactful session tomorrow. See you all then. Thank you and have a great evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. Wonderful session.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
With that, we'll end the session. Thank you.